Well, Caroline Levitt and Scott Bessent there. Mark Stone was in the room during that press conference at the White House, and we will come to him very shortly. But you're watching the Politics Hub. Tonight, the Prime Minister says he's not going to yield as Donald Trump threatens to tear up a trade deal and hits out at the government's policy on energy and immigration. And in a conversation with Sky News, Mr Trump resumes his ongoing attack on Sir Keir Starmer as a Lib Dem leader calls on the Prime Minister to call off the King's state visit to the US.
Surely the Prime Minister can't send our King to meet a man who treats our country like a mafia boss running a protection racket.
This as a Tory leader tackles the Prime Minister on defence spending after Sky News reported plans for billions of pounds of savings inside the Ministry of Defence. We will report live from the IMF meeting in Washington as the Chancellor calls for countries to work together to deal with the economic crisis that's been provoked by the Iran war. The Health Secretary says women are being gaslit, as he puts it, by the NHS. I will ask the Women's Health Ambassador why 51% of the population are made to feel like second-class citizens when it comes to healthcare. And let's talk about sex. We speak to the Labour MP derided at PMQs by Kemi Badenoch for her campaign to promote lifelong sex education. All that and more with Stephen Flynn and Daisy McAndrew, who'll be with me for the next hour. It's Wednesday. I'm Ali Fortescue, live from Westminster, and this is the Politics Hub. Hello, good evening. Welcome to the Politics Hub. Well, there have been two important bits of Sky reporting that came up at Prime Minister's Questions today. Firstly, the extraordinary conversation that our US correspondent Mark Stone had with President Trump, where he effectively threatened to row back on the UK-US trade deal, and a story we brought you yesterday from Sam Coates and Deborah Haynes about the Ministry of Defence being asked to save money just as there is such a push for more defence spending. They're very different stories, but they speak to the incredible balancing act that the Prime Minister is attempting right now. Our dwindling finances, calls for spending on defence and so much else, how to deal with an unwieldy US president, an impossible situation in the Middle East. Many in Labour do think he's juggling it all right, but it, of course, takes just one ball to slip for an entire act to collapse. Well, we will discuss all of that throughout the programme, but first, here is our political editor, Beth Rigby.
President Trump has threatened to rip up his trade deal with the UK as punishment for us not joining his idiotic war in Iran. Surely the Prime Minister can't send our King to meet a man who treats our country like a mafia boss running a protection racket.
Now, Ed Davey's not afraid of going in on Donald Trump. And what he was talking about there was a phone call between Sky News and Trump last night in which the US president mouthed off again against Keir Starmer and the special relationship, saying it was in a sad state and hinting that he might change the terms of the trade deal between the US and the UK. Now, Ed Davey knows that Trump bashing plays really well with his base, but is it helping Keir Starmer too? Because Donald Trump's really unpopular with Brits at the moment. 8 out of 10 people have a negative opinion of him. So standing up to Trump and refusing to join the Iran war might actually help Starmer with his own voters too, giving him an opportunity to look like a statesman trying to stand up to a right-wing populist.
A lot of pressure has been applied to me to take a different course, and that pressure included what happened last night. I'm not going to change my mind. I'm not going to yield.
Where he was more on the ropes was over defence spending, and Kemi Badenoch came out swinging, armed with words from none other than Lord Robertson. Now, this was really painful because Lord Robertson's a former Labour Defence Secretary and he was the lead author of the Starmer Defence Review. He was someone advising the Prime Minister on defence. And he was absolutely scathing about Starmer's approach to defence, saying that the UK was underprepared, underinsured and under attack. And Kemi Badenoch was very quick to punch that wound.
He won't fund our military because he wants to fund more welfare. That's why he has a welfare plan to 2031, but no defence investment plan at all.
And look, it makes sense for Kemi Badenoch to push the Prime Minister on this because she thinks she's on the right side of public opinion when it comes to cutting welfare spending, whilst the Prime Minister has loads of problems with his own backbenches when he tries to do the same. Keir Starmer wanted to avoid all that and get onto what he sees as firmer ground. His decision not to join the Iran war, whilst he criticised Badenoch for being what he sees as more trigger-happy.
She called for us to jump into the war. They remember it. I remember it. They're just embarrassed by it now.
So forget Ed Davey and Kemi Badenoch today, because the Prime Minister came up against two far more consequential foes, Donald Trump and Lord Robertson. And you might think that Donald Trump, with that giant megaphone and immense power, is the more dangerous foe. But it will be the words of Lord Robertson that will stick in the minds of Labour MPs.
We've been talking about Sky News' conversation with Donald Trump. We can cross straight to Washington and speak to Mark Stone, who's had that call, and he's just hot-footed it, I should say, from that White House press briefing we were just watching. Mark, you've been really busy in the last 24 hours. That interview, obviously, you covered a whole range of topics, and it's got a lot of traction, but I guess you've had some time now to reflect. What do you think now that you've reflected on it?
Well, it was pretty extraordinary, his scathing criticism of Keir Starmer, of the British government, of the direction of Britain, of the policies Britain is pursuing, whether it be on energy or indeed on immigration. I mean, he has said similar before, but for me, the tone and the thrust of what he was saying was harder. He seemed to have a real, almost a concern about the direction of Britain. And I put it to him at one point in the interview, I said, you know, why is it for you as the American president to sort of judge and determine and lecture Keir Starmer on how to run Britain? And he said, well, it's not. But I hear all the time that Britain's going in the wrong direction, that immigration's a disaster, that your energy policies are insane, his word, not mine. And so he kind of feels the need, as he put it, to sort of stand up for the Britain he would like to see. I mean, it was kind of fascinating. And the other thing to say, Ali, is that because it wasn't recorded, and there's a kind of unwritten rule with these phone interviews now, and he's doing quite a lot of them with the American media, an increasing number, is that the rule is that you can quote him, but you can't broadcast the interview. There are a few exceptions, like when he calls into Fox News, for example. But right at the beginning of the call, I said to him, I'm recording this for my own purposes. And he said, wait, will you won't be broadcasting it? And I said, no. And he said, I've got your word on that. And I said, yes. And he said, fine. And then we were away. But because of that, he wasn't performing in the way that we're all used to. And I think there's a nuanced difference there. People often talk about people who know him or who spend time privately with him say he's a different man or a slightly different man in private as he is in public, less performative when the camera's not rolling. And I definitely got that sense from him. So when I pushed back on his claim, for example, that immigration is that we're being invaded by foreigners, that they're being released from mental asylums, that they are that they are criminals. I pushed back on that. I suggested that it was a bit of his own fake news, and he, you know, had I asked him that in public, I imagine he would have gone straight at me, but he didn't. He's like, well, you know, you may think that, but I know from here that is the case with immigration. He was applying his own experiences as he sees them on American immigration to British immigration. So really scathing on Keir Starmer. He said the special relationship was in a sad state because of our insane energy energy policies. He had a go at the fact that Keir Starmer isn't drilling in the North Sea again, as he has done before. But then he would pivot away from that to talk about the King and the visit that's coming up. That's why we timed the call for last night, because the Buckingham Palace had just announced the state visit, the details of it. So it seemed like a good time to get from the president his reaction on that. What are you looking forward to? I said all of it, he said.
Mark Stone, thanks so much, and fascinating to hear how you managed to get through to him and how Donald Trump deals with journalists like you. So thanks so much. Let's bring in our duo for tonight, shall we? The SNP Westminster leader, Stephen Flynn, and journalist and broadcaster, Daisy McAndrew. Now, I don't know, have you two read the transcript of this call?
Yes, I have.
What did you think?
I mean, it's so interesting on lots of different levels. From a journalist perspective, what Mark was able to do there, having that conversation, with the President of the United States, is extraordinary. And to have it, particularly off the record, in some ways it makes it more relaxed and you feel that you're getting something more genuine. So from a journalistic point of view, I have to say hats off. And I kind of like the fact that Donald Trump is doing all these calls, because at least he's opening himself up to scrutiny, which is something that we would hope most politicians would do. Of course, then when you analyse what actually comes out of his mouth, perhaps the admiration slightly
and it's funny
slips down there.
Not off the record, but off the record. I mean, we can report it, but we can't release it. I mean, it's bizarre in this way.
It's curious to see a transcript involving Donald Trump that doesn't have lots of exclamation marks and capital letters involved. But look, flippancy aside, the president has got us into a situation, and by us I mean the world, where the only person who's benefited from his actions is Vladimir Putin, and he's bankrolling essentially his illegal war in Ukraine. All of us here domestically are worried about the impact of the oil and gas crisis as a result of his actions. And I'm sorry, but when you do that to the world and you put that pressure on every government across the planet, I'm not sure, no offence to Mark, that you should be doing phone-ins with journalists. I think you should be doing the heavy work of government to try and fix the problem that you've created. And maybe that's just beyond the president right now.
And as you were saying, or as you were implying, we are going to be impacted, as we know from the economic news that's come out this week. We're going to be impacted worse than most other G7 countries.
And we're going to come on to the economy actually in a minute. But Mark was talking there too about the King's visit.
The state visit.
Do you think that's going to patch things up? The President didn't seem to know that might have been something the Prime Minister wanted.
No, so I love the fact in the transcript that he was saying, I can't, we, the King and I, as it were, very, very good friends, the President and the King, he's a great guy. And then when Mark was pushing to say, yes, but he's only there because Keir Starmer wants him to be there, and you've been so rude to Keir Starmer that this is all a bit awkward. And I mean, from a British diplomatic point of view, it was good that actually Trump was saying he was looking forward to seeing him, because, of course, that's the whole point of that visit, is to try to smooth some of those ruffled feathers.
We're going to pause here because we're going to come back, as I've hinted, to talk about the economy, because the Chancellor is in the US for the International Monetary Fund alongside US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, each with a very different take on the war. First, here's Scott Bessent.
This quarter will be slower than it was. I think that first quarter was moving along well. And we've heard the president say that one of the reasons he believed that he was able to prosecute this war now, and other than he believed it was the right time to prevent Iran from having a long-term nuclear weapon and to decapitate the regime, was that the economy was in such good shape. This conflict is going to end, that I don't know whether it's 3 days or 3 weeks.
Well, the Chancellor, for her part, has described going into the conflict without clear objectives as folly. And this afternoon, she doubled down, saying the aim of the conflict wasn't clear.
The point I would make is not been clear over the last 6 weeks or so what exactly the aim of this conflict is. Is it, as was originally suggested, to get regime change? Was it to protect partners in that part of the world? Was it to stop the nuclear weapons program? Is it to start diplomatic talks, which were happening before? We've never been clear about what the goals of this conflict is, which is why the impacts in our economy, but also here in the US economy and around the world, and particularly for our allies in the Gulf, like Saudi and Qatar and the UAE, are so immense.
Well, as you can see, Ed Conway, our data and economics editor, is in Washington for us now. Ed, do you think, will the Chancellor be able to deliver some home truths to Scott Bessent?
Well, it does look, doesn't it, like she is trying to. I mean, those words that you just heard from her are among the most forthright that we've heard from any senior member of the UK government, certainly going much farther than Keir Starmer and asking questions about what the strategy is here. In an earlier newspaper interview, she used the word folly to describe what's happening right now. So she clearly is prepared to speak truth to power here. I think the question is the extent to which the UK is just regarded as a somewhat marginal power here. I mean, you know, Scott Bessent is here. He's the Treasury Secretary. The US is making decisions about what's happening in the Gulf right now. It is having enormous consequences on economies in countries around the world. And it's worth just saying, obviously, we in the UK are facing much higher petrol prices, diesel prices, kerosene prices, as well as slightly higher gas prices. Well, in other countries, like, for instance, Southeast Asia, it is a serious existential problem right now. Many countries effectively running out of energy because they're not able to pay the kind of prices that we are, many people at least in the UK are. And that's part of the backdrop to this meeting here. So it's the International Monetary Fund's spring meetings. They meet every kind of 6 months. They talk about the state of the global economy. And of course, the thing that's way at the top of the list this time around is the state of what's happening in the Persian Gulf and the knock-on consequences for everyone else. There is so much speculation right now, and you've been talking about it, some of it, about what might happen next, about whether this choke point is going to be opened, whether the US is going to come up with a deal with Iran, whether Israel is going to come to a ceasefire with Lebanon. But even so, for every day that the Strait of Hormuz remains closed, the world is being choked off of the energy it needs just to keep basic functioning going. And for as long as that's the case, then you have serious economic damage being caused. And so right now, for many people meeting here, and as I say, it's finance ministers, it's central bankers. You can see there's lots of security around for them at the moment as well. For those people who are meeting and talking here, that is the main concern. Damage is being done. There's really real problems of people's livelihoods. And they just want to know, not just, as Rachel Reeves was saying, why this is happening, but what is going to be done to try and mitigate some of those consequences.
OK, Ed Conway, thanks for that, Ed, live for us in Washington. And the far-reaching impact of the war is sure to feature heavily on our late-night programme, The Wrap, tonight from 10 o'clock. Here to discuss all of today's big stories and the best of tomorrow's papers will be the political editors of The Daily Mirror and The Sun, Lizzie Buchan and Jack Elson. Well, Stephen and Daisy are still here. Stephen, I mean, it's quite depressing hearing Ed Conway there, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, but it's not a surprise. I mean, my entire adult lifetime, your entire adult lifetime, the UK's economy has been pretty much cooked. There's been no growth whatsoever. Living standards have continued to fall and the tax burden's gone up. We chose proactively to choke off our main trading relationship with the European Union. We don't have any industrial base and we import all of our energy. It's a pretty dire state of affairs, and the consequence of that is borne out in the fact that the IMF have been clear that the UK is going to be the hardest hit by what's going on right now. And I think there's a real sense of purpose, not just in Scotland, but across the rest of these isles, for politicians to get a hold of this crisis and to act in a manner which reflects the sheer seriousness of it. And the best the Prime Minister could muster on Monday after a 2-week break when he came into the House of Commons was to tell the nation, to tell everyone on these isles, that he is monitoring the situation. Well, I'm sorry, but that's not good enough. We're all monitoring it when we go to the petrol pump and see it's nearly £2 for a litre of gas. They need to act. They need to act now. But of course, from my perspective, that should involve the powers over all these matters lying in Scotland and not in the hands of a Westminster government that's made our lives so difficult.
I suppose they have said they would act and they will target support, and there's so much that we still don't know.
Well, that's true, but I think it's amusing, and I don't mean this in any way other than sort of slightly ironic, to hear Stephen, and actually quite a lot of what Stephen says isn't that dissimilar from what Donald Trump says, in that some of the mistakes that have been made, I know, look at his face, he's absolutely horrified. Nothing so rude has ever been said to him. But in that, some of the mistakes, the big mistakes, structural mistakes that have been made to the UK economy are things that, weirdly, Donald Trump has been talking about, like importing so much of our energy, relying on foreign energy, those sorts of things. So you can come at these problems, you can see the problems, and obviously you can think that the solutions are very, very different, which is obviously the case.
Slightly different.
Yes, the case. But it doesn't change the fact that we do, people can agree we have fundamental structural issues with the way our economy is set up. And again, coming to Rachel Reeves saying, it's a great folly. Well, of course, they've boxed themselves into a situation where they are anti the war, but they're just monitoring it. So it's a very, very sort of flaccid response to what is a very, very difficult problem. And, monitoring is not going to help most of us.
Where would the SNP find all the money for all of this?
No, very easily. I mean, during the budget last year, and indeed I think in relation to the Chancellor's statement earlier this year, we suggested to them that they should follow the route of the IPPR in terms of a windfall tax on the banks, something which has been done on numerous occasions, which would raise enough cash to take £300 off of people's energy bills. Remember that promise pre-election?
But it is only a one-off.
Of course it's only a one-off, but there is structural issues.
What about defence spending? That would cost billions.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I'm always intrigued by discussion in relation to defence because, as I'm sure you're aware, in Westminster, my party gets heavily criticised for the fact that we don't believe in the UK's nuclear deterrent. Now, notwithstanding the fact that a Labour MP has been in a lot of bother because of their behaviours, alleged behaviours in relation to the Faslane base, there's a list of UK naval vessels that are out of action or don't even exist or are in dry dock, and it's a pitiful state of affairs. And, from my perspective in that context, I'm beginning to wonder whether the notion that the UK is best placed to defend Scotland is even a credible argument. And, of course, Scotland should have control of its own affairs in that context to make sure that we are secure.
And obviously you want North Sea oil to be Scotland's rather than the nation's. But if you put that to one side, people like Donald Trump and lots of people, I was listening to Stuart Rose, the former chairman, saying now is, he's quite an environmentalist, but he's saying now is the time to really get drill baby drill or whatever our equivalent expression is. And it's interesting to see, again, different people from different political backgrounds coming to that conclusion because we are in extremis.
Yeah, but
not Labour though.
But just in relation to energy, though, I think we need to be clear that when it comes to energy, yes, we're extracting it from the ground in order to provide for energy security. There's a field jackdaw which would provide 6% of the UK's energy gas demand by the end of the year if it was given approval. But it's not going to change people's bills. What it does do, though, is provide energy security, which is incredibly important.
Exactly.
What would change bills is separating the price of electricity from the gas market. Now, we're told that can't happen because gas is still the dominant factor. In Scotland, it's not. And yet we're told that we still have to pay these high prices. And I think for people back home, that's a profound frustration.
Interesting. We'll pause it there. We'll come back to you. You're watching the Politics Hub. Coming up, we speak to Sir Charlie Bean, former Deputy Governor of the Bank of England, on the prospects for the UK economy.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist... Hi, darling.
Beth Rigby, Sky News.
...is being a Sky News journalist. You said to people, I'm not coming back for more, but you have come back for more. Well, let's kick off and make a statement. What can our Prime Minister say to you to not impose tariffs? He's coming out! What more do you need?
Well, let's get more on the economic crisis brought on by the Iran war. Earlier, I spoke to former Deputy Governor of the Bank of England, Sir Charlie Bean, and I asked him what options the Chancellor has following the energy price shock.
There's obviously some pressure on her to do something to protect households and businesses. Now, we saw back in 2022 with the invasion of Ukraine, the government at that time introducing an energy price guarantee which applied to all households and similar support for businesses. And that was very expensive. If I remember right, the energy price guarantee cost about 40 billion. The total package, I think, came to something like 70 billion. Pretty large numbers. This time round, because the government's debt is higher relative to GDP, we're up round about 100%, the ratio of the government's debt to annual GDP. There's rather less room for manoeuvre. So I would be very surprised if the Chancellor went for some sort of universal support. The mantra is very much targeted and temporary, and she has basically made statements saying that's the sort of thing that she's thinking of. So it would be a limited support for poorer households and maybe targeted support for particular energy-intensive businesses.
And that would still potentially cost quite a lot.
Oh, it could still cost quite a lot of money, and there's a lot of latitude for deciding exactly what support measures might be introduced. Arguably, she doesn't really have to tie that down yet. It's only if the conflict lasts into the autumn and energy prices stay significantly elevated then that she needs to be thinking about it. Because during the summer, of course, people aren't using the same quantities of energy. Given the emergency situation, should she look at tweaking her fiscal rules? Well, she might be tempted to do that. To be honest, I don't think that is a sensible way forward. It's actually more sensible for her to say, well, you know, I'm going to temporarily go the wrong side of them because of the external events. But at the end of the day, the people who provide discipline on the government, it's not the OBR and the fiscal rules, it's the markets. And if market participants start worrying about the government's fiscal rectitude and think it's becoming more profligate, then the Chancellor will find that she's paying the penalty and that the government has to pay much more for its borrowing. Now, we've already seen the interest rates on UK government debt rise substantially since the start of the conflict, so up about 50 basis points. And of the G7 countries, we're paying the highest yield already, and that's indicative of both the difficult fiscal position that the country is in, the legacy of the Truss Kwarteng episode, and a little bit of nervousness about the UK's prospects. So where could the government get the money from? I mean, particularly when we're talking about increased defence spending, so much pressure from all sides. Well, of course, as you say, it's not just the issue of providing support for households and businesses to deal with the higher energy price, but there's lots of other demands for more spending, in particular defence. And I think the government has woken up to the need to boost that. And there's the existing demands in health and other areas. Now, you can say, well, are there other areas that we could cut? Welfare spending. But the government's under pressure from its own backbenchers. It's actually expanded spending there with the lifting of the two-child benefit cap. Raising taxes is the other way to go. Now, she's already had a couple of budgets with substantial increases in taxes. I don't think she really wants to go back in the autumn with yet another, but she may well be pushed into some sort of revenue enhancement measures.
Donald Trump has attacked the UK's energy costs. How much of a drag on growth are our energy costs?
Well, it is true we have relatively high energy costs compared to peer countries. That's partly because of the structure of energy, that it relies heavily on gas, just the way we've chosen to go. There is a logic to saying, well, you know, we do have reserves of oil and gas under the North Sea that we're not exploiting. Now, were they being exploited, it wouldn't do very much to bring down the price, certainly of oil, and only limited to a limited degree of gas, because they're largely set in international markets. But as a country, we would be better off, because instead of having to import stuff where we're paying foreigners for it, we would be producing more of it ourselves, and the government would get some tax revenues, presumably from exploitation of that North Sea oil and gas. So I can certainly see the logic of saying we ought to be exploiting that more. Now, this needn't run against the longer run objective of trying to reduce reliance on fossil fuels, but at least during the transition period, it seems eminently sensible to me that we should be using those more intensively, as well as developing other sources of energy, such as nuclear.
You're watching the Politics Hub. Coming up, the Health Secretary says the NHS has a problem with sexism and misogyny. Well, I was speaking to the Women's Health Ambassador about what can be done.
Big stories don't always come from big cities. I'm Lisa Dowd and I'm Sky's Midlands correspondent.
You are not getting in this elevator, okay?
The judge made it very clear that she could see no justifiable reason why Sakulas wasn't here facing British justice.
I promised I would get him justice.
Free, wherever you get your news. This is what they're up against, that the wind is the really big problem. It is back-breaking work and the smoke is thick. It's been working well. Water levels are dropping, but no one knows what impact further rain will have. What would you do if this place wasn't open? This is the exact spot in Nottingham where their 19-year-old son, Barnaby Webber, lost his life.
I just think it's so cruel and so harsh.
It's really scary. We're terrified.
In this community, I'm told that everybody knows someone affected by COVID.
Hopefully this will be the last wave.
Sky News gets the full story first. Change seems tantalisingly close in this corner of the UK. Wales was the first to introduce the plastic bag charge. It's legal to let go. Set the speed and take the hands off. It's almost driverless, but not quite. Hans is a highly trained police dog. The force is incredible. It's really frightening, actually. This is my patch, my specialism. It's also my home.
Liberation Day.
By popular demand,
Wow.
here we are.
Donald Trump. It is quite the story. Wherever it goes, on Trump 100, we go with it.
Tell us who you're looking for.
Unbelievable we've come to this.
Are you overstating the reach and significance of this deal?
Not like you said it.
From the UK.
Why don't you go back to your country where you have a major migrant problem?
It was 10 feet from him, and all of a sudden the shots rang out.
People impacted.
I'll tell you on another day on the podcast what that was all about.
Join us wherever you get your podcast.
Second-class citizens whose voices don't matter. The words of the Health Secretary as he launched a renewed women's health strategy. New plans aim to stop women, again his words, being ignored, gaslit, humiliated and disrespected. It sets out 117 action points, but a number of organisations have said it's not enough. First, here's a little more from Wes Streeting speaking earlier today.
The mission is a simple one: to dismantle once and for all the culture and ingrained behaviours that allow medical misogyny and everyday sexism to fester and grow. The prize is a big one: shorter waits, fewer painful procedures, more control over your health and more opportunities to take part in research that affects you. That work has already begun with our renewed women's health strategy, which promises a fairer, healthier future for women and girls everywhere.
Well, that's Wes Streeting, and a little earlier today I spoke to Professor Dame Leslie Regan, the Women's Health Ambassador for England. Why do you think it is that women are being overlooked? The Health Secretary this morning was talking about women being gaslit. What do you think he meant by that?
It told that they are exaggerating things, telling them that, they're hysterical or, they don't really have pain. And then there's an ethnicity problem as well. Black and Asian women are often told, oh, you're a strong woman, you can bear pain. I mean, it's appalling that anyone who goes to see a gynaecologist, well, any doctor, but particularly a gynaecologist, for some form of intimate examination leaves in pain. I mean, it'll stop them ever going again, won't it?
Yeah, why do you think that is? Why do people think that women are overreacting?
Well, I think that they think, I've heard clinicians say, and I've heard nursing staff say as well, it's nothing like the pain of childbirth. But, that's why we've got epidurals now. I don't think you get prizes for being in pain.
Yeah.
And I think we do have to really change it. But I think most importantly, Ali, we've got to really understand that there are so many things that women go to healthcare professionals for where they're not sick. They're trying to maintain their health. They're trying to ensure that they can carry on with what they're doing, or they're preventing problems.
And just to be clear, what the things that you're talking about?
Well, period problems. I mean, there is nothing else that happens to a human being quite as commonly as having 12 periods a year for 40 years of your life. And if every single period means that you're wound up in bed for a day with a hot water bottle, or you're so frightened of going out because you're flooding, that is very, very disabling. That's before we talk about the anemia you get and the iron deficiency and the brain fog that comes with that and the feeling exhausted and washed out.
And part of this problem is waiting lists. I was reading that women can wait up to 10 years to be treated for endometriosis. Can you give us a
I'm glad you've brought that one up, because I'm always being asked, we must do something about endometriosis. And my comment is always, no, you don't wake up one morning with endometriosis. You develop it like you develop fibroids over a period of time. And if we included a simple question in every healthcare exchange about periods and just said, right, are you still having periods, Ali? Which is a very tactful thing to say, because of course I would have to say, no, I'm a menopausal woman. But we say that, and then all you need to say to that woman is, well, do they ever stop you getting on with your life? So I'm not expecting the orthopaedic surgeon or the neurosurgeon or the cardiologist to know lots about period pains and how you manage them. But I do think they could say, are you having periods, and do they ever stop you getting on with your life? Remember that something like 4 out of 5 young teenage girls have missed school regularly because of period problems. And that, many of them live in homes where they're told, oh, well, that's just what happens. So we've got to stop this.
I can see you've got the strategy in front of you. Do you think, there's so much pressure at the moment there's not much money, obviously there's pressure everywhere. Do you think that this problem is actually going to be fixed? And right now, do you think the NHS is still failing women and girls?
Well, when I say, I'm here and I've been appointed and I've now lasted into 2 governments, and we are making progress. You want to talk about this. You brought it up, you told me at your news conference this morning. We have made it very much more mainstream. But now we've got to take it to the next step. So I see this refresh as being the next step on the journey. And I think what we've really got to get embedded is the fact that there may be no extra money, But I would say to every finance officer and every trust and every general practice, every community budget, I would say you can't afford to carry on doing women's health badly because it costs a fortune. I mean, I will sometimes see women now in casualty coming in needing blood transfusions. Or they will come in and they've been told that because their chest pain isn't classically like a male heart attack, that they haven't had a heart attack. And then they have a problem. So, and then whilst they're not being treated, their problems are getting worse. You mentioned endometriosis, cardiovascular disease. Women are treated at a much later stage. And then, surprise, surprise, we find that all the drugs and all the treatment interventions have been trialled on men. And women are a little bit different. And I think what we're trying to get, well, over the last 4 years, I've been trying to get everyone to understand is that we've got to do some myth busting. So women are not little men. They're very, very different. They're a little bit complicated, but just because they're a little bit complicated, that makes them rather wonderful, I think. And, women's health is not just about reproductive health. It's all the other things. I frequently say to people, my daughters who are in their 30s are going to live longer post-reproductive than they were reproductive. And that's really important because I don't think at the moment our health service is really geared to that. And we've got to change it. Because, the things that are going to kill you and I are the cardiovascular disease and the complications of osteoporosis and frailty and dementia. And yet, if I ask most women walking along Millbank tonight, what do you think you're going to die of? They'll probably tell me breast cancer. And they're wrong.
Okay.
So, twice as many women die every year of heart disease as all the female cancers put together.
It's a really interesting interview. Let's bring our panel back in. I thought this story was fascinating, particularly hearing Daisy from Wes Streeting talk about women being gaslit.
Yeah, and I think his language was really powerful and talking about how the NHS is misogynistic. And of course, you immediately start to think of a human being being misogynistic, but actually he's talking about the structure and the way that the NHS is set up. And I bet you have, I've had my own experiences and they've not been good. My 2 childbirths at the NHS were riddled with mistakes that could easily have not been made, but people, I wasn't listened to, and this is you just hear it again and again and again, and this is 18, 20 years ago, and it doesn't seem like much has changed, and certainly with things like coils being put in and no pain relief being given, people having major operations or, female procedures and being sent home with a paracetamol and a pat on the head. These are the things that are happening countless times every day.
And it's important to get a male perspective as well, Stephen. What do you think?
I think Wes is totally right. Now, in Scotland, we've had Professor Anna Glazier working with the Scottish Government, and we're now on phase 2 of the Women's Health Plan, which is really positive. But, we have a system which has been built by men, primarily for men, and that leads to severe inequalities, and we need to right that wrong. And, I, like most guys who are married and have seen childbirth and experience what their partner has gone through and all of the things that they do, but you're also then aware of the consequences of that in a way that you weren't when you were a teenage kid just going around the world. And I struggle sometimes to reconcile the impact that those things have had upon my family members with if something similar had happened to me as a man. I would demand something a little bit better from the NHS, and they'd probably offer me something a little bit better, and that shouldn't be the starting point, and Wes is right in that regard.
Do you think this will be fixed with all the pressures on funding?
Almost certainly not. I hate to be, so sort of Eeyorish about it, but that is the case. And one of the other problems is, we all know, making a complaint at the NHS, it does depend how big your voice is, how confident you are, very often on your ethnicity, your gender, and so on. And then the other problem is the time of life when these things happen. So whether or not, I was talking to a friend today whose mother had died of cancerous endometriosis, and she'd constantly gone to her doctor and said, I've got agonising pains in my stomach, and he was just like, whatever, and then she died of it. And of course, when she did die, her daughter knew perfectly well that she'd had bad treatment, but she was riddled with grief and didn't have the strength to make the complaints. And I was the same after my really bad experiences after my first child was born, I had a brand new baby and, you know, a sort of battered and bruised body. And so I wasn't in the right state of mind to make formal complaints because I was too exhausted.
I mean,
and that's the problem with the NHS.
I mean, it's ridiculous. You see a woman having a child, and there's obviously had to be surgery involved, and not the usual means. And then within a day or two, they're sent home to look after a baby. And, you know, like, after any other serious operation, that wouldn't be the case.
Yes. But because every other woman's done it, you're expected to just breeze through it.
Yeah, go and carry around something after a major operation. It's crazy.
And we, Sophie Ridge, I should say, has done a lot of reporting on this. So we're big on this at Sky. And actually, it's one of those stories where we get so many emails, more than any other story, really. And I don't think we predicted that. Thank you both. We'll come back to you. You're watching the Politics Hub coming up. Let's talk about sex, and in Parliament, no less. We'll hear from the MP mocked by Kemi Badenoch for her campaign for better sex education.
Coming up on the UK tonight at 8, the not-so-special relationship will get reaction from Washington and Westminster as Donald Trump renews his attacks on Sir Keir Starmer in an interview with Sky News. Plus, the government announces new digital IDs for prisoners as it's revealed that 3 inmates are being freed by mistake every week. And who coughs up for the clean-up will visit a huge fly tipping site that's going to cost £8 million to clear. All that and much more on the UK tonight at 8.
Big stories don't always come from big cities. I'm Lisa Dowd and I'm Sky's Midlands correspondent.
You are not getting in this elevator, okay?
The judge made it very clear that she could see no justifiable reason why Sir Koulas wasn't here facing British justice.
I promised I would get him justice.
Free, wherever you get your news. This is what they're up against, that the wind is the really big problem. It is back-breaking work and the smoke is thick. It's been working well. Water levels are dropping, but no one knows what impact further rain will have. What would you do if this place wasn't open? This is the exact spot in Nottingham where their 19-year-old son, Barnaby Webber, lost his life.
I just think it's so cruel and so harsh.
It's really scary. We're terrified.
In this community, I'm told that everybody knows someone affected by COVID.
Hopefully this will be the last wave.
Sky News gets the full story first. Change seems tantalisingly close in this corner of the UK. Wales was the first to introduce the plastic bag charge. It's legal to let go. Set the speed and take the hands off. It's almost driverless, but not quite. Hans is a highly trained police dog. The force is incredible. It's really frightening, actually. This is my patch, my specialism. It's also my home.
Liberation Day.
By popular demand,
Wow.
here we are.
Donald Trump. It is quite the story. Wherever it goes, on Trump 100, we go with it.
Can you tell us who you're looking for?
Unbelievable we've come to this.
Are you overstating the reach and significance of this deal?
Not like you said it.
From the UK.
Why don't you go back to your country where you have a major migrant problem?
It was 10 feet from him, and all of a sudden the shot's rang out.
People impacted.
I'll tell you on another day on the podcast what that was all about.
Join us wherever you get your podcast.
Now, backbench MPs' campaigns regularly consist of things like speed restrictions, local hospitals, trains, potholes worthy, yes, but not necessarily attention-grabbing. That is not the case, however, for Samantha Niblett's campaign for a summer of sex, with more open, inclusive and lifelong sex education. Her plans, which include promoting sex toys in Parliament, have propelled her from the backbenches to the front pages, and she was even raised by Kemi Badenoch at Prime Minister's Questions.
This is a moment of profound national seriousness. And what are they doing? They're promoting sex toys in Parliament. That's what they're doing. Mr. Speaker, it gives a whole new meaning to fiddling while Rome burns.
Well, Sky's Lucy McDade met Samantha Niblett earlier today.
We are seeing such frightening things happening with violence against women and girls where sex is being used in an oppressive way. Britain talking about sex in a way that is not, where we're not embarrassed, where we drag it out from the shadows, that would go a long way towards empowering people so that less sexual violence and oppression happens.
It's grabbed quite a bit of attention and people have been picking up on you saying orgasm, talking about sex toys, talking about bringing sex toys into Parliament. Was that the purpose, to shock people into listening to what you're saying? Should it be shocking what you're saying?
Well, to your point, the fact that people are shocked and it has caught the headlines kind of goes some way to proving that really we need to be talking about it. It shouldn't be so shocking. And also, if I'm saying, well, we need to take the shame out of sex.
The response has been quite divided. Some people, some women, criticising some of the stuff you've said. In terms of bringing sex toys into Parliament, Lucy Powell, Labour's deputy leader, has said she doesn't think it's the right place for it. Do you think part of the reaction is because you're a woman talking about sex?
I think when it comes to Lucy's comments about having sex toys in Parliament and it's not appropriate, I think context is missing here. The ambition is to have an event in Parliament where we can help break down some barriers. And a key part of that is having sex toys in Parliament.
Kemi Badenoch today in the House of Commons said Labour is promoting sex toys and the government is giving a whole new meaning to fiddling while Rome burns. She was talking about defence spending and accusing the government of focusing on something like this too much. And what should you make of that?
This is a cross-party issue. I was really disappointed to hear her sort of have such a cheap shot. We're not promoting sex toys. And it just takes away from the seriousness of the campaign and what we're hoping to achieve, which is about empowering people and making people happier. So it just felt like all it did, I think, was prove the case for the need for the campaign.
And do you think, I mean, MPs sometimes get flack. You know, there's a war in Iran at the moment, people are talking about the cost of living. Do you think that's fair criticism, or is this, you know, you feel really passionately about this and it's something that you want to talk about?
There will always be things that are happening in the world that are not good, and at the minute it does feel like, you know, it's burning, doesn't it? But people are still going about their day, they are still having sex, they're still wanting to have sex, and again, the most important thing, there are still people that are victims and survivors of sexual assault. And so whilst ever that is the case, I think there's always a case for this campaign.
Right, let's bring Stephen and Daisy in. You know, watching that, I mean, you know, the headlines are quite shocking and obviously it's awkward talking about sex on live TV, but does she have a point there, Daisy?
Yeah, Daisy.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks. I feel like, yes, I'm going to throw this hot potato in. Look, of course she has a point about sex education, and we've always had a really big problem in this country with teenage pregnancies and teenage mums. We now have many fewer teenage mums, but we still have a lot of teenage pregnancies. So teenagers are having a lot of abortions, and some of those teenagers are becoming mums. And most of the evidence and most of the research tells us it's because our sex education is not good enough. It's also linked to poverty, the areas where poverty is highest. We have more teenage mums and teenage pregnancies. So these are serious issues and they deserve political solutions. But of course, the minute you start talking about sex toys and all the rest of it in Parliament, you just know that everybody's going to start giggling and you're going to lose the argument. And I hate to say it, but I'm so impressed that you managed to say her name without giggling, because that's the other thing about this story, that everybody is going to turn it into some sort of Beano sniggerfest. And I think she's slightly guilty of making it a Beano sniggerfest because of the way that she's publicised it.
Yeah. Look, there was, in the last Parliament, there was the Tory MP who got caught watching his alleged tractor porn and then had to give up his seat. So maybe this is an improvement on that level of debate. But look, there's a wider issue here which I actually think we should talk about more often in Parliament, and particularly male MPs should talk about it, which is to do with the manosphere and this environment, this toxic, horrible environment 100%. Which is being promoted online by particularly males who treat women, particularly young women, like absolute dirt. And, you know, if things like this, although this, I'm not really sure of the intricacies of this particular thing in Parliament, if it allows us to get into that space to talk about how men are treating women and how younger men are treating women right now, then that's a good thing, because that's a really
I guess that's it.
horrible
Yeah, there's
episode.
harmful content out there on one side, and then this kind of clinical content on the other side. So do we need something in between?
And we absolutely do need to talk to kids and teenagers about this stuff, whether it's about contraception, and particularly, I agree with Stephen, whether it's about the way that porn has been showing what a normal relationship is, which is, not absolutely not normal. And we've talked about this so many times with politics, whether it's sort of showing a kind of a form of domination or choking, which has become something that teenagers who have sex now think that's normal because of what they've seen watching porn, and even things down to body image, and they see what sort of porn stars look like. And there are so many issues that are leading to problems within those relationships, and yet it's quite funny. My experience of that generation is with relationships, they can also be quite prudish when it comes to to certain things, and so some things have landed. The idea of consent seems to have landed more than it was, let's say, 10, 20 years ago. They're very, very careful to say, I mean, what would be ridiculous to our generation, sort of, can I kiss you, or that sort of thing, because they've had it. They understand that consent is a really big issue. So there have been some wins, but there's a lot of room for improvement.
And before we go, time for one last question. Stephen, this could be your last politics hub, because, well, we don't know, but you might win in the local elections, and that might mean that you would no longer be an MP.
Yeah, national elections in Scotland. We don't call them local elections.
Sorry, national elections.
It's okay. Look, I'm actually quite excited. I'm obviously, Westminster's been a big part of my life the last 6.5 years, but if I get the opportunity to serve in the Scottish Parliament, that's an exciting thing for me.
And you'll miss being able to physically come to the Sky News studio, presumably.
You know what? I feel like I've been strong-armed into saying this ever so slightly, but the one thing that I will miss the most is coming into the Sky studio and seeing all you great folk.
Surely the food and beverage offerings of the Parliament, parliamentary estate, are
we'll
difficult
do a proper
to beat.
goodbye off air. Thank you both, Stephen and Daisy. That is all we have time for tonight. That is it from us. We will be back tomorrow at 7 o'clock. Up next, the UK Tonight with Sam Washington, and we will be back tomorrow. Thanks so much for watching.